The night was still, but the land was burning. Enugu was gone, yet the war refused to die. From above, I saw the new Biafran capital in Umuahia flicker with oil lamps, its leaders huddled, plotting survival. On the maps before them, the Nigeria army was closing in from every side, but Ojukwu's eyes blazed with defiance. If we cannot hold the east, he told his generals, then we must strike where they do not expect. And so began a gamble, one that would carry Biafran troops across rivers, into new territories and to the edge of victory, before betrayal dragged them back into dust and fire. The Midwest invasion and Owerri. The fall of Enugu was a wound, but Biafra was not ready to die. Ojukwu and his generals believed boldness could change the war. Instead of just defending, they struck west in a daring gamble. In August 1967, Biafran forces crossed the Niger River and swept into the Midwest region. The invasion was led by Colonel Victor Banjo, a Yoruba officer who had joined the Biafran cause. With him was the fiery Achusia, always eager for a fight. Their orders: move fast, seize Benin City, and if possible, march all the way to Lagos itself. At first, the plan worked like magic. In just one day, Biafran troops took Benin. Federal soldiers retreated in shock. For a brief moment, it looked like Nigeria itself might fall apart. But victory was a mirage. The Biafran troops, many poorly supplied, pushed further west, but at a small town called Owerri, they met fierce resistance. There, Nigerian troops regrouped under officers like Colonel Murtala Mohammed, who later became famous as head of state. At Owerri, Murtala's forces fought with ferocity, determined to stop the invaders. The battle was brutal. Bullets cracked through the air. Mortars shook the ground. The Biafrans fought hard, but were stretched too thin, with little backup. By September, they were pushed back. The dream of Lagos collapsed in the dust of Owerri. Back in Biafra, the defeat created suspicion. Ojukwu accused Colonel Banjo and others of plotting betrayal. Banjo, along with 3 other officers, was tried for treason and executed by firing squad. The invasion that could have changed history ended in blood and mistrust. From above, I saw the lines drawn more clearly now. Nigeria would push in from every side, north, west, and coast. Biafra would fight like a cornered animal, striking with ambush, speed, and desperation. The war was no longer an idea. It was now a burning map. Every town was a square, waiting to be crossed. The Abagana Ambush, March 31st, 1968. The day the road to Anambra caught fire. From the clouds, I saw a long Nigerian convoy stretching across the road like a giant snake. 106 vehicles, 6,000 soldiers, trucks heavy with weapons, fuel, and confidence. They moved fast, too fast. They believed nothing could stop them. But in the bush ahead, Biafran fighters were waiting. The Ogbunigwe, Biafra's deadly invention. Biafra had no tanks, no air force to match Nigeria, but they had ingenuity. Engineers and scientists inside Biafra created a homemade weapon, the Ogbunigwe, meaning mass killer. It was a landmine, a bomb built from scraps, but devastating if used correctly. Colonel Christian Air Raid Achusia, and local commanders planned the trap. The ambush ignites. The convoy rolled deep into the kill zone. At the signal, Biafran fighters struck. The first hit was a truck full of Nigerian soldiers. A deafening crack, a flash of white heat, then fire. The flames leapt higher than the trees, swallowing trucks in seconds. Explosions rippled down the line. Boom, 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 like thunder chasing itself. From above, it was as if the earth itself had split open. Nigerian soldiers screamed, running in every direction. Some dropped their rifles and fled into the bush. Others were consumed by the fire. By the time the smoke cleared, more than 1,000 Nigerian troops were dead, and the road was littered with blackened vehicles. It was more than a military victory. It was a message. Biafra might be starving, but it could still bite. In villages across the east, news of Abagana spread like fire. People sang songs of triumph. Children clapped their hands. But in Nigerian camps, the mood was different. Convoys moved slower now, nervous at every bend. The ambush had scarred their confidence. From my sky, the flames of Abagana burned bright against the darkness of war. But even as I watched, I knew one thing. Fire, no matter how fierce, cannot feed a starving nation. Victory in battle did not end the hunger. And hunger was winning more than the guns. The Siege of Owerri. By late 1968, the war had become more than bullets and bombs. It had become a war of waiting. The Nigerian army had learned something. They did not always need to take a city by storm. Sometimes, all they had to do was surround it and let hunger do the work. And no city showed this truth more than Owerri, the knot at the center. Owerri was not the biggest city in Biafra, but it was a knot in the middle of the map. Whoever held it controlled the roads to the south. Federal commanders knew this. That's why they surrounded it. Generals like Benjamin Adekunle, nicknamed the Black Scorpion, and Olusegun Obasanjo, who led the 3rd Marine Commando Division, pressed in from the south and west. Adekunle had already captured Port Harcourt earlier that year, choking Biafra from the sea. Now, his eyes were fixed on Owerri. From the north, Shua's 1st Division tightened its grip. Inside the city, Biafran officers like Colonel Lambert Iheanacho and Achusia air raid turned Owerri into a fortress. Streets became trenches. Houses became bunkers. Every alley could be a trap. But life inside the siege was not just soldiers. It was families. Hungry families. Food became as rare as bullets. Civilians boiled cassava leaves into soup. Some chewed tree bark. Children sucked on stones to trick their stomachs into thinking they had eaten. At night, mothers rocked babies too weak to cry. Still, the city held on. Biafran propaganda called Owerri the heart that cannot break. And for months, that seemed true. But Nigeria attacked again and again. Columns of soldiers pushed in, only to be repelled by ambushes and mines. Sometimes, the fighting was so close I could see men stabbing with bayonets, face to face, until one stopped moving. One Nigerian officer later admitted, Owerri fought like it wanted to stay alive, even when there was no food left. By day, smoke rose above the city. By night, silence. But silence in war does not mean peace. It means exhaustion. Finally, after months of siege, starvation did what artillery could not. The defenders were too weak to stand. Some soldiers collapsed at their posts, rifles slipping from their hands. When the Nigerian troops entered, there was no grand battle. There was just surrender and silence. Owerri had fallen, and with it, another thread of Biafra had been cut. From my sky, I could see the pattern more clearly than ever. This war was not about taking towns quickly. It was about cutting them off and letting hunger finish the job. By mid-1968, the war was no longer measured in battles won or towns captured. It was measured in days without food. Nigeria had sealed Biafra like a jar of insects. No ships, no trucks, no trains. Markets were silent. Fields were empty. Starvation became the sharpest weapon of the war. The world began to see the images. Children with swollen bellies and stick-thin arms. Mothers with hollow eyes, still rocking their babies even when the babies had stopped breathing. One foreign journalist wrote, "In Biafra, the smell of death was not gunpowder, it was hunger. But in the middle of the darkness, there was a light, the Uli airstrip. What had once been a small road became Biafra's last artery to the world. At night, 8 planes slipped in, guided only by torches and the prayers of the crowd waiting below. They called it the Jesus Christ Airlines because even the pilots prayed when they landed. From above, I saw them, ghostly shapes gliding low over the trees, engines almost silent, their bellies full of powdered milk, biscuits, and medicine. When a plane touched down, the crowd swarmed. Relief workers tried to keep order, but desperation is hard to control. Sometimes food reached the hungry. Sometimes it was stolen. Sometimes it was sold on black markets. But always, it was never enough. It was here that the world's conscience was stirred. Missionaries, priests, doctors, and journalists from Europe and America carried the story back home. They showed the haunting pictures of starving children with wide eyes and swollen bellies. Those images were broadcast into living rooms around the world. Outrage grew. Churches raised money. Aid groups demanded access. It was from Biafra that new organizations were born. Most famously, Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, created because doctors were tired of seeing politics block mercy. But for every child saved by a sack of milk powder, another died unseen in the bush. By the end of the war, estimates said over 1 million people, most of them children, had died from starvation. It was not just a war. It was a famine weaponized, a blockade turned into a slow execution. And from my sky, this was the most disturbing sight of all. This war was never just Nigerian. It was also a war of foreign hands. Britain, the former colonial power, stood firmly with Nigeria. London supplied weapons, ammunition, and political cover. Why? Oil. The rich oil fields of the Niger Delta were too important to lose. The Soviet Union also backed Nigeria, eager to expand influence in Africa. They sent weapons, advisors, and even Egyptian pilots flying Soviet-made MiG jets. Their bombs fell on Biafran towns. France, meanwhile, whispered support to Biafra. They smuggled arms through neighboring countries like Ivory Coast and Gabon. French mercenaries trained some Biafran fighters, but their support was never enough to change the balance. Israel gave quiet aid, mostly humanitarian, but avoided full involvement. China, wanting to embarrass Moscow, sent some weapons through Tanzania. The United States called itself neutral, but American oil companies leaned toward Nigeria, and Washington never recognized Biafra. By early 1970, the end was clear. The Nigerian army launched Operation Tailwind, a final push from all sides. Generals like Obasanjo, Adekunle, and Shua drove the divisions deeper into the shrinking Biafran territory. Uli airstrip, once the miracle lifeline, was bombed until it was nothing but craters. The last artery was cut. Inside Biafra, soldiers were too weak to fight. Some dropped their rifles and simply walked away. On January 9th, 1970, Ojukwu boarded a plane to Ivory Coast, fleeing into exile. The next day, his deputy, Major General Philip Effiong, announced on radio, "The Republic of Biafra ceases to exist." In Lagos, Gowon gave his victory speech. His words were soft: no victor, no vanquished. He promised reconciliation. He promised rebuilding. But from my sky, I could see the truth. There had been victors, and there had been graves. The famine did not stop just because the guns did. Many still died in the weeks that followed, too weak for food to save them. When the war ended, Nigeria was still one nation, but the scars were deep. Families searched for missing loved ones. Some found bones, others found nothing. Ojukwu lived in exile for years before returning. Some called him a hero. Others blamed him for leading his people into ruin. But for those who lived it, Biafra was not history. It was memory, a scar carried in their hearts. And every so often, when the night is quiet, I still hear it. The wail of mothers at Uli, the crack of rifles in Enugu, and the slow heartbeat of a nation that's almost stopped. I hope you enjoyed this story.